So the current Noble experience is totally different than like what you experienced as Noble alum.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing with our audience like what are some key differences that you experienced and like what our students are experiencing now?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because one thing that I name is that as a black man, I was a black boy who was a member of the community in Noble that experienced some of the most marginalized experiences in Noble. And I think, I think that's important to name, and that's important for me to continue to like embrace in my leadership and understanding that. And what I'll say first is like, I think there's so much more intentionality to ensuring that our students have space to be heard. And I'll even say a word that I'll use is our students have more power in ways that I don't think I ever had when I was in Noble. It was kind of this idea of like, be seen and not heard. This idea that really perpetuated the patriarchy, that our anti-racism commitment is like naming as a thing that we're working to dismantle. And I think there's been a lot of work to dismantle that. And I think that's in our practices. And also like even in our policies, I think there's more space for our students to be. Mm-hmm. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is like, how do we leverage that opportunity? One thing I'm asking myself is how do I censor our students' aspirations by asking them, what are your aspirations? And then like, how does your experience align to those aspirations? And I would name that, I don't know if that was something that I experienced when I was a student. It was really like, here, do the thing that we said do because this thing is important. And I think there were some elements of that that spoke to the expertise of our instructors and of like the staff members. But I think it was missing my voice. It was missing my experience. And I think a lot of our work this year is around centering the voices of the students. And I think it's about like, what are your aspirations? And like now, how do those aspirations speak to like college? And how does it align to college? And maybe even how does it align to college? And like, what does that look like for you 8, 6, 10 years down the road? And I think that's a powerful experience. I could get into some of the weeds around like dress code and like detentions and like how a lot of times their responses to like my mistakes was punitive. And it didn't teach me. At best, it like may have stopped me from wanting to do a thing, but I didn't learn why I shouldn't do that thing. And like a lot of our efforts now is around making sure that students really understand like the impact of their actions, and it's rooted in more of a response versus like a punishment.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking about that power, like what are you hoping like students learn from being given this power, right? Not even given this power, like them claiming, right? The power they've always had, right? With the systems that you all put in place. Like what do you hope that they gain?
Yeah, I hope that they gain that they have the brilliance and experience and expertise to create positive multi-generational change. And like what that looks like is, hey, we're seeing a thing isn't working, a thing is broken. Like not only do you have space to reimagine what they can look like while you're in high school, the purpose of your high school experience, so you can leave it with the tools, the knowledge, the skills, the resources to like also create that change once you leave here. Because one thing I believe is that we're all born to solve a problem. And I think our students have this brilliance and expertise where like Noble can be that space where they're able to like really lean into that imagination process, similar to like what we're also trying to do as a network.
So Noble could be the catalyst to then understand that when given the opportunity to, that power that they do have is they have the ability to be able to create that multi-generational change for themselves, right?
Exactly.
And Noble is a catalyst, right, to continue to teach skills, right, to give the platforms, right, for them to be able to do those things. When you take that and you think about the different changes that were made, you mentioned very briefly, like there's no more detention. The merits are not being used. Some of the things that stop students from feeling connected are not gone now. How are students now engaging with staff now with more of a voice to be heard? How are students experiencing this space now? Do they feel seen? Is there evidence to show that they feel more welcome? Different than they felt in the past?
Yeah, I think that's a place where we have some tension right now. And I think that tension is real where like our students have that space to stand in power. And now the question is, back to this point I made earlier about policy and practices, how does our practices center the capital that our students bring to our spaces that we can continue to leverage in them actualizing their aspirations and like developing those skills? I think that's an opportunity for us to continue to refine and to develop. So our students, when they come in and like, maybe this space is just boring. It's like, yeah, and I'm not going to, no longer is our approach around I'm going to force you into compliance with using a tool to make you compliant. It's now pushing us to think about how do we create more engaging lessons, and how do we create a more engaging experience? It's no more like, hey, you stop and listen to me because I have this tool that I can use. It's like, now I got to build a relationship with you. Because like now our interactions are centered on like relationships and how do you feel seen and feel heard and valued and feel that sense of belonging. And it's hard. And I think that's pushing us even as like a staff to like really like think about like our practices and how we continue to like lean into that experience so our students can stand in their power while also like having an amazing and positive school experience where they develop the skills, the tools and resources needed to create that change.
All right, so you talked a lot about your intentional focus on student belonging and connectedness, which leads to student agency. How has that student agency led to the student experience being anti-racist for our students?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think our just our work this year has really allowed us to create space to center the capital that our students have in ways that serve as an antidote to white supremacy culture. And that now we're asking ourselves, like, what does our curriculum look like? And we're engaging in that ongoing examination process of our practices that allows students to take up space. And I think what that means is like now, when we have a student who may be louder than what we're used to, we're asking ourselves, like, how are we allowing them to take up space to express their emotions? Where in the past, it would be, you're being disrespectful. When actually, like, no, they just have a different way of expressing themselves, where our culture sometimes weaponizes the way that our Black and brown students show up in spaces, where we want to be a space where we don't do that. And like, to me, I think that's important because no longer are we punishing our kids for ways that they may show up authentically. We're gleaning into critical conversations around like, what is true about our practices? What is true about our policies? What is true about like maybe how I contributed to that student reacting in a certain way? So like, oh, this student was loud. It showed up for me as I'm uncomfortable, but really they were just expressing themselves. And my response to their noise volume would be much different than my response to another kid crying. Mm-hmm. And like, why is that the case? And how do I ensure that I'm not allowing my own bias to then impact it, impact the way that I may respond to that? Transformational process. It's not going, and transformation is not going to take 3 months, 4 months. I think, especially after being away for 18 months, maybe it's going to take 18